Richard Carter pressed his secretary against the mahogany desk, his wedding ring catching the afternoon light as his fingers tangled in Vanessa's hair. His wife's face smiled up at him from the photo frame just inches away. He didn't even glance at it. He never did anymore. "Your wife called again," Vanessa whispered, breathless. "Third time today." Richard laughed, cold, dismissive. "Let her wait. She's good at that." He checked his Rolex, the one Evelyn had saved for months to buy him. "We have 20 minutes before the board meeting. More than enough time." He had no idea that at that exact moment, his wife was stepping into the elevator 14 floors below, clutching lottery confirmation papers worth $80 million. Their 12-year-old son stood beside her, asking if Daddy would finally be proud of Mommy now. Richard had no idea his entire world was about to end. Before we begin, subscribe to our channel and follow this story to the very end. Comment below with your city so we can see how far our story has traveled. Your support means everything. The elevator rose. 12, 13, 14. Each floor a lifetime. Evelyn Carter watched the numbers climb. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The confirmation letter crinkled in her purse. $80 million. The numbers still didn't feel real. "Mom, your hands are shaking," Lucas said. At 12, her son had learned to read her tremors, the fractures she tried to hide. Evelyn forced a smile. "Just excited, sweetheart." Excited. That's what she told herself. Not terrified. Not desperate for validation from a man who'd stopped seeing her years ago. "Do you think Dad will be surprised?" Lucas asked. Evelyn squeezed his hand. "I think your father is going to be very surprised." The doors opened. Jennifer, the receptionist, glanced up. Her eyes flickered with something Evelyn couldn't name. "Mrs. Carter, we weren't expecting you." "I know. I wanted to surprise Richard. Is he in his office?" Jennifer's jaw tightened. Just barely. "He's in a meeting." "That's fine. We'll wait." "Actually," Jennifer's voice dropped, "maybe you should come back later. He specifically asked not to be disturbed." The words landed wrong. Evelyn had heard them before, dozens of times, always accepting them as natural order. Richard was important. Richard was busy. But today, with $80 million in her purse, Evelyn heard something else. "It won't take long," she said, firmer than she'd intended. "I just need 5 minutes." She walked toward Richard's office before Jennifer could object. Lucas trailed behind. The hallway stretched ahead. Awards lined the walls. Richard shaking hands with senators. Richard accepting plaques. Richard. None of them mentioned her. That would change now. Richard's office door was closed. Evelyn reached for the handle. Her fingers wrapped around cold metal. That's when she heard it. Laughter. Low. Intimate. Completely wrong. Then a woman's voice. Breathy. Familiar. "We shouldn't. Not here. Not with your wife calling every 5 minutes." Evelyn's hand froze. The world tilted. Richard's voice came next. Warm. Affectionate. The tone she couldn't remember him using with her in years. Evelyn knows her place. She won't make a scene. She never does. The words struck like fists. Lucas tugged her sleeve. "Mom, what's wrong?" Everything. Nothing. The truth she'd been too afraid to see. Her mind clicked backward. The late nights Richard blamed on board meetings. The perfume on his shirts she'd convinced herself meant nothing. The way he'd stopped touching her, stopped looking at her, stopped pretending their marriage was real. She thought winning the lottery would change things. She thought money would make her visible. But standing outside his door, hearing him laugh with another woman, Evelyn understood. She'd been invisible long before she'd been poor. "Mom?" Lucas whispered, voice cracking. "Should we go?" The old Evelyn would have retreated, smoothed it over, found some way to make it her fault. But that Evelyn had walked into this building with lottery papers and foolish hope. This Evelyn was someone different. She turned the handle. The door swung open. Richard leaned against his desk, jacket off, tie loosened, shirt partially unbuttoned. Vanessa Morrison, his vice president of marketing, stood between his legs, her hand on his chest, his hand on her waist. They weren't kissing. They didn't need to be. The intimacy was in every line of their bodies, every familiar gesture, every comfortable touch that spoke of repetition, of practice, of time. Time that should have been Evelyn's. Nobody moved. The moment held like a photograph. Then Richard saw them. His eyes met Evelyn's. Not guilt, not shame, irritation. "Evelyn." His voice was flat, controlled. "You should have called first. Not, 'I'm sorry,' not, 'This isn't what it looks like,' just a casual reprimand." Vanessa stepped back, smoothed her skirt. Practiced. Easy. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked comfortable. Like this wasn't the first time. Like this wasn't even the 10th time. "Hello, Vanessa," Evelyn heard herself say. Voice strange, distant. "I didn't realize you were in a meeting." "Actually," Richard said, straightening his tie, "we were just finishing up. Vanessa, we can continue this discussion tomorrow." The audacity stole Evelyn's breath. He was going to pretend, right there, in front of their son, in front of God and everyone. Vanessa gathered her tablet. As she passed Evelyn, she smiled. "Sorry to keep your husband so late, Mrs. Carter. You know how demanding his schedule is." Poison wrapped in courtesy. Evelyn saw it clearly now, the subtle mockery, the shared joke she'd never been in on. How long had they been laughing at her? Lucas pressed against Evelyn's side, his small body rigid. He didn't understand the full picture, but children always knew when something was fundamentally wrong. After Vanessa left, Richard moved to pour himself a drink. Scotch. The expensive kind Evelyn had bought him. Spending carefully budgeted money because she knew he preferred quality. "You should have called," he repeated, taking a slow sip. "I don't appreciate surprises at the office." Evelyn stood in the doorway, the lottery papers suddenly feeling like lead. She'd come here to share good news. She'd come here to finally matter. "I won the lottery," she said quietly. $80 million. She waited for shock, for excitement, for some crack in his perfect composure. Instead, Richard's eyes narrowed, calculating. "Don't be ridiculous, Evelyn. You don't gamble." "I bought one ticket. Last Tuesday. I won." He set his glass down. Sharp click. "You're serious?" "Completely." Richard stared at her. For the first time since she'd walked in, real emotion crossed his face. Not joy, not pride. Assessment. The same look he gave quarterly reports. "Well," he said finally, "this changes things." The words should have been celebratory. Instead, they sounded like a threat. "I thought you'd be happy," Evelyn said, hating how small her voice sounded. Richard laughed, sharp, cold. "Happy? Evelyn, do you have any idea what this means? Tax implications alone are going to be a nightmare. We'll need to meet with accountants immediately, lawyers, financial planners. This requires serious management." "We." The word rang hollow. "The ticket is in my name," Evelyn said quietly. "Just mine." The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Richard's expression shifted, hardened. Obviously, it will need to be moved into joint accounts for tax purposes. Estate planning. Our family. Our family. The same family he'd been betraying with his vice president. No, Evelyn heard herself say. I don't think it will. The word hung like a grenade. Richard's face flushed dark red. Excuse me? I said no. Her voice grew stronger. It's my ticket, my winnings, my name. Don't be absurd. We're married. What's yours is ours. That's how marriage works. Evelyn thought of all the years she'd made his career her priority. All the opportunities she'd sacrificed. All the time she'd made herself smaller so he could be bigger. And now, when she finally had something of her own, he was already claiming it. Like Vanessa is ours? The question slipped out. Richard's eyes went cold. Don't start something you can't finish, Evelyn. I'm not starting anything. I'm ending something. I'm ending the part where I pretend not to notice. Mom, Lucas whispered, tugging her hand. Can we go? Richard's gaze shifted to his son. For just a moment, something like regret flickered. But it died quickly, replaced by calculated control. Lucas, go wait outside. Your mother and I need to talk. No, Evelyn said firmly. Lucas stays with me. Richard's jaw clenched. You're being dramatic, embarrassing yourself in front of our son over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Something cracked inside her. Something that had been holding her together for 15 years. Is that what we're calling it? Evelyn, lower your voice. You're in a corporate office. The casual cruelty took her breath away. What Evelyn didn't know was that at that exact moment, Richard's phone was recording every word. Not accidentally, deliberately. He'd pressed record the moment she'd mentioned the lottery, already building his case, already preparing to paint her as unstable, irrational, unfit to control $80 million. But she would discover that soon enough. I want a divorce, she said. The words came out steady, clear, final. Richard laughed, dismissive, cruel. No, you don't. You want attention. You want drama. Well, I'm not playing that game, Evelyn. Go home. Cool off. We'll discuss this like adults when you're ready to be reasonable. I've never been more reasonable in my life. Really? Richard leaned back, arms crossed. You're going to throw away 15 years of marriage over one moment of indiscretion? Destroy our son's family because you saw something you didn't like? One moment. As if this was new. As if this was the first time. How long? Evelyn asked quietly. How long have you been sleeping with Vanessa? That's none of your business. I'm your wife. It's absolutely my business. Richard sighed, like she was a difficult child asking tiresome questions. Fine. You want the truth? 2 years, maybe 3. I stopped counting. The casual admission hit harder than any angry confession would have. He didn't even care enough to lie well. And before Vanessa? Her voice cracked. How many others? Does it matter? You got what you wanted, didn't you? The house, the lifestyle, the social position. Don't pretend this marriage was ever about love, Evelyn. We both know it was a transaction. Lucas made a small sound, between a gasp and a sob. Evelyn looked down. Tears streamed down her son's face, his young features twisted with pain. This was the moment she'd fought so hard to avoid. This was why she'd stayed quiet for so long. But looking at Lucas now, Evelyn realized silence hadn't protected him. It had taught him that betrayal was normal, that women should accept disrespect, that love meant making yourself invisible. Come on, sweetheart, she said softly, taking Lucas's hand. We're leaving. Evelyn, don't be childish. Sit down. Let's discuss this rationally. She turned back to Richard. This man she'd given 15 years to felt nothing but vast, empty clarity. "I'll have my attorney contact you," she said. "All communication goes through legal counsel from now on." "Your attorney?" Richard's laugh was ugly. "With what money? You don't have money. I have money. Everything you have, I gave you. Everything you are, I made you." Evelyn reached into her purse, pulled out the lottery confirmation letter, held it up so he could see her name. Only her name, printed next to that life-changing number. "Not anymore," she said quietly. "Not ever again." She walked out, past Jennifer's carefully averted eyes, past the awards that meant nothing, past the life she'd built from silence and compromise. In the elevator going down, Lucas finally spoke. "Is Dad a bad person?" Evelyn crouched down, met her son's tear-stained face. "Your father made bad choices, and now those choices have consequences. Are you going to be okay?" The question broke her heart. 12 years old, already trying to take care of her, already learning to worry about his mother's well-being because his father never had. "Yes, baby, I'm going to be more than okay. We both are." They walked through the lobby, out into the afternoon sun. Evelyn's phone buzzed, repeatedly. Richard, already calling, already trying to regain control. She turned the phone off. In the parking lot, Lucas stopped suddenly. "Mom, you're not crying." Evelyn realized he was right. No tears, no breakdown, no collapse. Just strange, cold clarity spreading through her like ice water. "No, honey, I'm not crying." "Why not?" She thought carefully. "Because I think I've been crying on the inside for so long that there's nothing left. And now, finally, I can stop." They drove home in silence. Different silence than before. Not the silence of things unsaid. The silence of things, finally, devastatingly, clear. When they pulled into the driveway, Evelyn sat with her hands on the steering wheel. "What happens now?" Lucas asked. Evelyn looked at their house, at the life she'd carefully constructed, at the facade she'd maintained so long it had started to feel real. "Now," she said, "we build something true." Inside, she moved through rooms that suddenly felt like a museum of her own diminishment. Every carefully chosen decoration, every perfectly placed photo, every sign of the happy family they'd never actually been. She went to the bedroom she'd shared with Richard for 15 years, pulled out a suitcase, began removing clothes from his closet, his drawers, his side of everything. Her phone buzzed again. She answered. "What are you doing?" Richard's voice was tight, barely controlled anger. "Packing your things. You can pick them up tonight, or I'll leave them on the porch." "You can't kick me out of my own house." "It's our house. And yes, I can. I am." "Evelyn, be reasonable. You're upset. I understand. But this is extreme." "No, Richard. Extreme was what I saw in your office. This is just the consequence." "If you do this, there's no going back." "I know," she said. "That's the point." She hung up, continued packing. Movements mechanical but purposeful. Lucas appeared in the doorway, watching. "Is Dad going to be mad?" "Yes." "Is he going to try to come home?" "Probably."
What will you do?
Evelyn looked at her son, this beautiful boy who'd learned too young that the world wasn't fair. "I'm going to stand in the doorway," she said quietly, "and I'm going to tell him no. And I'm going to keep telling him no until he understands that this time, I mean it." What Evelyn didn't know was that Richard was already 3 steps ahead, already on the phone with his personal attorney, already drafting papers to freeze joint accounts, already preparing to paint her as mentally unstable, already building a case to claim the lottery winnings as marital property. He'd underestimated her once, He wouldn't make that mistake again. The doorbell rang 3 hours later. Evelyn knew it was Richard before she opened it. He stood on the porch, his expression a careful mask of controlled fury. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Let me in." "No." "Evelyn, I'm tired. I've had a long day, and I'm not playing these games. Move." I said no. He stepped forward. For the first time in 15 years, Evelyn saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. Not anger, not frustration. Cold calculation. The look of a man who'd spent their entire marriage believing she would always back down, always give in, always choose peace over her own dignity. "You don't want to do this," he said softly. "You don't want to make me the enemy. You made yourself the enemy the moment you decided I didn't matter. I built this family. I built this life. Everything you have, I gave you." "Then you should have no problem building a new one," Evelyn said. "Somewhere else." Richard's mask finally cracked. "You think you can survive without me? You think $80 million makes you independent? I have lawyers, Evelyn. I have connections. I can make your life a living hell." "Then do it," she said quietly. "Because hell with clarity is better than heaven built on lies." They stared at each other across the threshold. In that moment, Evelyn saw her husband. Really saw him. Perhaps for the first time. Not the image she'd created. Not the potential she'd believed in. But the reality of who he actually was. A man who viewed marriage as ownership. Who saw love as transaction. Who believed his wife's silence meant consent rather than survival. "This isn't over," Richard said. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "It is." She closed the door. On his face. On 15 years of compromise. On the woman she'd been who believed making herself smaller would somehow make her more loved. Behind her, Lucas stood in the hallway. "Mom, are you scared?" Evelyn turned to her son and smiled. This time it wasn't forced, wasn't performance. "No, baby," she said. "For the first time in a very long time, I'm not scared at all." That night, after Lucas was asleep, Evelyn sat alone in the living room. The house felt different without Richard's presence, lighter, as if his absence had created space for her to finally breathe. Her phone rang again. She let it go to voicemail, listened as Richard's voice filled the room with threats disguised as concern, manipulation dressed up as care. "You're making a mistake. Think about Lucas. Think about what this will do to our family. Think about what people will say. I'm willing to forgive this moment of insanity if you come to your senses now." Evelyn deleted the message without finishing it. Tomorrow she would call an attorney. Tomorrow she would begin the legal process of disentangling herself from 15 years of shared assets and shared lies. Tomorrow she would start building a life based on truth instead of convenience. But tonight, she sat in the silence she'd chosen, holding the lottery ticket that had changed everything and nothing. And she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of a woman waiting to be seen, not the anxious hope of someone trying to earn love, but the quiet, steady hope of a person who had finally stopped waiting for someone else to determine her worth. The house settled around her, creaking, sighing. Somewhere upstairs, Lucas slept, safe, whole, learning through her actions that dignity was worth fighting for. Evelyn pulled out her laptop, began making lists, attorney names, financial advisors, therapists who specialized in children of divorce, the practical steps of dismantling a life and building a new one. And as she worked, she realized something profound. The $80 million wasn't what had changed everything. The lottery wasn't what had saved her. She had saved herself. The money had just given her the courage to finally do what she should have done years ago. Outside, a car pulled into the driveway, idled, then drove away. Richard, circling, trying to intimidate her through his presence. Let him circle. Let him rage. Let him finally experience what it felt like to want something he couldn't have, to need something he couldn't control. She was done being small, done being silent, done being invisible. And tomorrow, when the sun rose on the first day of her new life, Evelyn Carter would be ready. Her phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Carter, this is Jennifer from Mr. Carter's office. I recorded today's conversation. All of it, including what he said before you arrived. If you need it, it's yours. Some of us have been waiting a long time for someone to stand up to him." Evelyn stared at the message, read it twice, 3 times. She wasn't alone. She'd never been alone. She'd just been too afraid to see it. She typed back, "Thank you. I'll be in touch." Then she set the phone down, turned off the lights, went upstairs to check on Lucas one more time. Her son slept peacefully, face relaxed, the tension he'd carried for years already beginning to ease. Evelyn kissed his forehead, whispered into the darkness, "We're going to be okay, baby. Better than okay." In her own room, she lay in bed, stared at the ceiling. The hurt came in waves, quiet, controlled, manageable. But beneath it, something stronger had taken root. She was no longer reacting. She was deciding. And though Richard believed this was merely a temporary disruption, another conflict she would smooth over, Evelyn knew better. The woman who had walked into his office that afternoon had left something behind. The woman lying awake now was someone else entirely. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. Richard would fight dirty. She knew that now. He would use every resource, every connection, every manipulation tactic he'd perfected over 15 years. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated her, and by the time he realized his error, it would be too late. Evelyn closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to plan. Because the storm was coming, and this time, she would be ready. Morning came without mercy. Evelyn woke at 5:30, not because she'd slept, but because her body finally gave up pretending. She'd spent the night staring at her phone, reading Jennifer's text over and over, trying to understand what it meant that someone had been watching, waiting, documenting Richard's cruelty for years. Lucas was still asleep. She could hear his breathing through the wall, steady and peaceful in a way hers would never be again. She made coffee. Her hands didn't shake anymore. That surprised her. Yesterday they'd trembled holding lottery papers and hope. Today they were steady holding nothing but resolve. At 6:15 her phone rang. Daniel Brooks, the attorney whose number she'd found at 2 in the morning through a simple search for divorce lawyers who'd gone up against powerful men and won. "Mrs. Carter, you're up early." "I haven't been to bed." A pause. "Good. That means you're taking this seriously. Can you be at my office by 8? "Yes." "Bring everything. Every document, every photo, every text message. And Mrs. Carter, don't tell anyone you're coming. Not friends, not family, especially not your husband. He doesn't live here anymore." Another pause, longer this time. "You kicked him out already?" "Last night." Daniel's voice changed, warmer, almost approving. "Then you're already 3 steps ahead of most women who call me. See you at 8. Evelyn dressed in what she thought of as her armor. Navy suit, low heels, Pearl earrings Richard's mother had given her on their wedding day. Let him remember what family he'd destroyed. She left a note for Lucas. Simple. Clear. Gone to appointment. Mrs. Henderson next door if you need anything. I love you. The drive downtown took 40 minutes through traffic that felt like judgment. Every red light a reminder that she was doing this. Really doing this. Dismantling 15 years in exchange for a future that terrified her almost as much as staying had. Daniel Brooks's office wasn't what she expected. No mahogany, no intimidating portraits, just clean lines, good lighting, and a woman at the desk who looked at Evelyn like she'd seen this face 1,000 times before. Determined, terrified, holding on by a thread. He's ready for you. Daniel stood when she entered. 60, maybe. Silver hair. Sharp eyes that had seen every version of betrayal humans could invent. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered his hand. Sit. Tell me everything. So she did. The office. The Nessa. The years of feeling invisible. The lottery ticket that should have changed everything, but only revealed what had always been true. Daniel took notes. Didn't interrupt. Didn't react. Just absorbed information like a computer processing data. When she finished, he set down his pen. Mrs. Carter, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest. Okay. Did your husband know about the lottery before yesterday? No. I called him, but he didn't answer. That's why I went to his office. Daniel's expression shifted, something between concern and calculation. Are you absolutely certain? Yes. Why? He pulled out a file, slid it across the desk. Because your husband retained a divorce attorney 3 weeks ago. The words hit like cold water. Evelyn stared at the documents. Legal letterhead. Richard's signature. Dated 2 weeks before she'd won anything. That's not possible. It's not only possible, Mrs. Carter. It's documented. Your husband was planning to divorce you. The lottery didn't trigger this. It just changed his strategy. The room tilted. Evelyn gripped the edge of the desk. He was going to leave me anyway. Yes, and from what I'm seeing here, he wasn't planning to be generous about it. These preliminary documents suggest he was building a case to claim you'd been financially irresponsible, that you'd contributed nothing to the marriage, that you'd need minimal support because you'd made no effort to maintain employable skills. Each word was a small violence. Evelyn felt them accumulate, pressing against her chest. How did you get this? Daniel smiled, thin, professional. I have sources. Let's leave it at that. What matters is we know he was already in attack mode before you knew there was a war. So the affair was probably meant to provoke you into leaving. Make it your choice, your fault. Cleaner that way. Less expensive. Evelyn thought of Richard's face yesterday. The irritation, not guilt. The calculation in his eyes when she'd mentioned the money. And now? Now he knows you have $80 million. Now he's going to fight to claim half of it as marital property. He's going to argue that without him, you'd never have been financially stable enough to buy that lottery ticket in the first place. He's going to paint you as unstable, vindictive, turning their son against him. Can he do that? He's going to try. Evelyn's phone buzzed. Text from Richard. She turned the screen so Daniel could see. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. Think about Lucas. Daniel read it. Don't respond. Every communication goes through me now. And Mrs. Carter, it's going to get worse before it gets better. How much worse? He's going to come after you with everything he has. Your parenting, your mental state, your fitness to manage money. He has resources, connections, a PR team that can make you look like the villain in a story, where you're clearly the victim. So what do I do? Daniel leaned forward. You do exactly what you did last night. You stand your ground. You document everything. You don't engage. And you trust me to handle the parts you can't. At 9:30, Evelyn's phone rang again. Not Richard this time. Her bank. Mrs. Carter, this is Sandra from First National. I'm calling about your accounts. Evelyn's stomach dropped. What about them? There's been unusual activity, large transfers. We need to verify these were authorized by you. What transfers? From your joint account to an account in your husband's name only. Approximately $200,000. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. I didn't authorize that. I understand. We've flagged the transactions. But Mrs. Carter, I need to inform you that your husband has also filed paperwork to freeze the joint account pending divorce proceedings. Evelyn looked at Daniel. He was already typing on his phone, moving pieces she couldn't see. Sandra, this is Daniel Brooks. I'm Mrs. Carter's attorney. I'm emailing you documentation right now that countermands any freeze order. Those are marital assets, and my client has equal access. I understand, Mr. Brooks, but the request came from Mr. Carter's legal counsel. They're claiming Mrs. Carter has shown erratic financial behavior and may be a flight risk. Flight risk. Daniel's voice was ice. Mrs. Carter won the lottery 4 days ago and hasn't spent a dollar. Her husband, meanwhile, just transferred $200,000 without her knowledge. Who sounds erratic to you? A pause. I'll need to consult with our legal department. You do that. In the meantime, freeze everything. No transfers in or out without both signatures. And Sandra, document this conversation. All of it. He hung up, looked at Evelyn. He moved fast. Will I get that money back? Eventually. But Mrs. Carter, this is what I meant. He's already positioning himself as the responsible party managing out-of-control finances. By the time we get to court, he'll have a narrative that makes you look impulsive and him look protective. But it's my money. No, it's marital money until a judge says otherwise. That $200,000 came from joint savings you both contributed to. The lottery winnings are separate. For now, Evelyn's hands finally shook, not from fear, from rage. He planned this, all of it. Yes, and he's been planning longer than you knew, which means we need to move faster and smarter. At 10:45, Evelyn met with Thomas Reed, the financial advisor Daniel insisted she see immediately. Thomas was younger than she expected, 40 maybe, spoke in clear, simple terms that didn't feel condescending. Mrs. Carter, your priority right now is protection, not growth, not investment. Protection. From my husband. From legal exposure. The lottery winnings are in your name, which is good. But your husband's attorney is going to argue that marital circumstances enabled the purchase. That makes it murky. So what do I do? You establish a separate account. Today. You move the lottery proceeds into a trust structure that protects them from marital asset division. You document every cent you spend and why. Can he still claim half? He can try, but if we move now, before he files official papers, we establish clear separation. The longer that money sits in a simple account under your name, the more vulnerable it is. Evelyn signed papers she barely understood, trusting Thomas the way she'd learned to trust Daniel in the span of a single morning. Trusting strangers because the person she'd trusted for 15 years had been planning her destruction while she'd slept beside him. By noon, her phone had 17 missed calls. 12 from Richard, 5 from numbers she didn't recognize. Daniel called. Don't answer any of them. Richard's attorney just filed emergency motions. They're requesting temporary custody of Lucas, claiming you're in crisis and making erratic decisions. Evelyn's blood went cold. They can't take my son. They won't, but they're going to try to scare you. This is psychological warfare, Mrs. Carter. He wants you panicked, wants you to make mistakes.
What mistakes?
Responding emotionally, saying things that can be recorded and used against you. Keeping Lucas from him in ways that look like parental alienation. He's baiting you. So I do nothing? You do everything right. You keep Lucas's routine normal. You document Richard's behavior. You stay calm. At 1:15, Lucas called from school. His voice was small, wrong. Mom, can you come get me? What happened? Dad came. He's in the office. He says he's taking me for lunch, but Mrs. Patterson says she needs to talk to you first. Evelyn was in the car before Lucas finished speaking. She made the 20-minute drive in 14. Mrs. Patterson, the principal, met her at the office door. Her face was careful, neutral. Mrs. Carter, your husband is claiming there's been a family emergency, and Lucas needs to come with him immediately. There's no emergency. We're separated. He doesn't have permission to remove Lucas from school. Richard appeared in the doorway, saw Evelyn, smiled. That smile was the worst thing yet. Calm, confident, the smile of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Evelyn, good. We can discuss this like adults. There's nothing to discuss. Lucas stays in school. Lucas is my son. I have every right to have lunch with him. Not during school hours without my consent. Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. Actually, Mrs. Carter, we have both parents listed as emergency contacts with equal authorization. Unless there's a court order. There will be. Evelyn pulled out her phone. Called Daniel. Put him on speaker. Tell her. Daniel's voice filled the small office. Professional. Authoritative. This is Daniel Brooks, Mrs. Carter's attorney. Mr. Carter is not authorized to remove the child from school without Mrs. Carter's express consent. If he attempts to do so, it will be documented as parental interference and filed with family court this afternoon. Richard's smile didn't waver. This is ridiculous. I'm taking my son to lunch. No. Evelyn's voice was steady, clear. You're not. They stared at each other across Mrs. Patterson's desk. The principal looked between them, clearly calculating which parent was more likely to sue the school for making the wrong call. Perhaps, Mrs. Patterson said carefully, we should keep Lucas here today, until this is resolved officially. Richard's smile finally cracked. You're turning him against me. I'm protecting him from you. From his own father? From a man who lies, who cheats, who's trying to use his son as a weapon. Richard stepped closer, voice dropping. Dangerous. Be very careful, Evelyn. You don't want to make me the enemy. You made yourself the enemy. I'm just finally fighting back. He left without another word, but as he passed, he whispered low enough that only she could hear. You're going to lose everything, and when you do, don't say I didn't warn you. Evelyn waited until he was gone before her knees buckled. Mrs. Patterson caught her elbow, guided her to a chair. Mrs. Carter, should I call someone? No, I'm fine. Can I see Lucas? Lucas came in pale and confused. Mom? What's happening? Evelyn pulled him close, felt his heart racing against hers. Nothing you need to worry about. Dad and I are working some things out. You're safe. Always. But Lucas pulled back, looked at her with eyes that had aged years in a single day. Dad said you're sick, that you're not thinking clearly, that the money made you crazy. The words were Richard's poison in their son's voice. Lucas, I need you to hear me. Really hear me. Your father is lying. I am not sick. I am not crazy. I am protecting us.
From what? From someone who doesn't have our best interests at heart. But he's my dad.
I know, baby, and that makes this so much harder. But being someone's parent doesn't give them the right to hurt people, not even family. Lucas was quiet for a long time. Then, is he going to hurt us? Evelyn wanted to lie, wanted to promise safety she couldn't guarantee. But Lucas deserved truth. He's going to try, but we're not going to let him. At 3:30, Jennifer called.
Mrs. Carter, I have the recording. All of it. Not just yesterday. Everything.
Evelyn's heart stopped.
Everything?
6 months of conversations, his office phone, some conference rooms, places I wasn't supposed to have access to, but did, because he never noticed the secretaries. Never noticed any of us.
Why are you doing this?
Jennifer's voice cracked, just slightly. Because he tried to fire me last year, when I asked about maternity leave.
Because he told me I should be grateful to have a job at my age.
Because I've watched him destroy good people for sport, and I'm tired of being complicit. Can you send it to my attorney? It's already sent. Mrs. Carter, he says terrible things about you, about women, about anyone he thinks is beneath him. When you hear it, it's going to hurt.
I know.
But it's also going to win your case. At 5, Daniel called again. I have the recordings. Jennifer wasn't kidding.
This is devastating. How bad?
Bad enough that Richard's attorney is going to recommend settlement the moment we threaten to file them publicly. Mrs. Carter, he doesn't just discuss the affair. He discusses financial manipulation, plans to discredit you, conversations about moving assets offshore. This isn't just marital misconduct. Some of this borders on fraud. So what happens now? Now we let him think he's winning. We let him make his motions, file his claims, build his case, and then we bury him with evidence he didn't know existed.
That feels like letting him hurt us longer.
It is, but pain now prevents disaster later. Trust me. That night, Evelyn and Lucas ate dinner in silence. Pasta. Simple. Normal. Except nothing was normal, and they both knew it.
Mom, are you going to be okay?
The question shattered her. Because Lucas shouldn't have to ask, shouldn't have to worry, shouldn't have to be brave when he should just be 12.
Yes, I promise. Do you promise, or do you promise like when you said Dad worked late because he cared about us?
The distinction destroyed her. I promise, real promise, true promise. Lucas nodded, pushed pasta around his plate. I heard him, yesterday, what he said to that lady, about you.
Lucas,
he said you were pathetic, that you'd never leave because you had nowhere to go. He laughed when he said it. Evelyn couldn't breathe. And then you won the money. And I thought maybe now he'd see you're not pathetic. Maybe now he'd be sorry. Oh, baby. But he's not sorry, is he? He's just mad that you're not pathetic anymore. The truth of it. The absolute painful truth of it. No, honey, he's not sorry. And that tells us everything we need to know about who he is. Lucas looked up, eyes wet but fierce. I don't want to live with him, if the judge asks. I don't want to. Lucas, he's your father. You don't have to choose. I already did when I heard what he said about you. When he tried to take me from school today. I already chose. Evelyn held her son and cried for the first time since this began. Not for herself, for him. For the father he deserved and would never have. At 8, her phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. You think you're clever. You're not. By the time I'm done, you'll have nothing. Not the money, not Lucas, not even your dignity. I built you. I can destroy you just as easily. She forwarded it to Daniel without responding. His reply came immediately. Perfect. Keep them coming. Every threat is evidence. At 9, another text. Richard's number this time. Last chance. Meet me. Talk this through. For Lucas's sake. She almost responded. Almost fell for the bait. But then she remembered his voice through the door yesterday. Remembered she knows her place. Remembered every small cruelty disguised as partnership. She blocked his number. At 10, Lucas was asleep. Evelyn sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. Silence was just the space between attacks now. Her phone rang. Daniel. Mrs. Carter, I need you to hear something. He played a recording. Richard's voice, clear, unmistakable. The lottery doesn't matter. It's marital property. I'll get half minimum. And once I prove she's unstable, I'll get full custody and control. She won't know what hit her. Another voice, male. His attorney, probably. What if she fights? Richard laughed. She won't. She never does. That's the beautiful thing about breaking someone slowly. By the time they realize they're broken, they don't remember how to be whole. The recording ended. Mrs. Carter, are you there? Evelyn couldn't speak. The casual cruelty, the calculated destruction. This was the man she'd loved, built a life with, given everything to. Mrs. Carter, I know this is hard, but this is also your weapon. This is how we protect you. Finally, she found her voice. When do we use it? Soon. Very soon. He's going to make his big play, and when he does, we'll be ready. After Daniel hung up, Evelyn sat in the dark. She didn't cry, didn't rage, didn't collapse. She planned. Because Richard had spent 15 years teaching her to be invisible, to stay quiet, to accept less than she deserved. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd assumed that invisible meant powerless. And tomorrow, he would learn exactly how wrong he'd been. Tomorrow came faster than Evelyn was ready for. She woke to her phone ringing at 6:45. Daniel's name on the screen, his voice tight with controlled urgency when she answered. He filed this morning. Emergency hearing at 9. Judge Morrison. He's claiming you're a flight risk with the lottery money and that Lucas is in immediate danger due to your deteriorating mental state. Evelyn sat up. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Mental state? He submitted affidavits. 3 people claiming they've witnessed erratic behavior. 1 from Vanessa Morrison, ironically. 1 from his mother. 1 from a neighbor I've never heard of. What neighbor? A James Patterson. Lives 2 doors down, apparently. Says he's seen you screaming at Lucas in the driveway, throwing Richard's belongings around recklessly, behaving in ways that suggest emotional instability. Evelyn's mind raced. James Patterson. The man who'd complained about their tree blocking his view, who Richard had played golf with twice, and suddenly they were best friends. None of that happened. I know, but he's building a narrative fast. Can you be at the courthouse by 8:30? Yes. Bring Lucas. We need Judge Morrison to see him calm and safe with you. She hung up, looked at the clock. 2 hours to prepare for a battle she'd never wanted. 2 hours to hold together what Richard was trying to shatter. Lucas was already awake when she knocked, sitting on his bed, staring at his phone. Mom? Dad texted me. He says I get to choose where I live today, that the judge is going to ask me and I should tell the truth. Evelyn sat beside him, took the phone, read Richard's message with growing fury masked as calm. Lucas, the judge might ask you questions. And if they do, you tell the truth. Your truth. Not what Dad wants you to say, not what you think I want to hear. What you actually feel and want.
What if I say the wrong thing? There's no wrong thing, baby, just honest things.
At the courthouse by 8:20, Daniel met them at the security entrance. He looked like he'd been awake all night. Probably had been. They're already inside. Richard, his attorney, Vanessa, his mother. They brought reinforcements. Why is Vanessa here? Character witness. She's going to testify about your behavior at the office. Paint you as aggressive and unstable. Evelyn felt Lucas stiffen beside her.
She's the one Dad was with. The one who... Why does she get to talk?
Daniel knelt down to Lucas's level. Because your dad's playing a game where truth doesn't matter as much as performance. But we have something they don't.
What?
Actual truth. On tape. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than Evelyn expected. Not the grand drama of television. Just harsh fluorescent lights and worn carpet, and a bench where Judge Morrison sat, reviewing files with the expression of someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out 100 times before. Richard sat with his attorney, Marcus Webb, a man whose suit probably cost more than Evelyn's car. Richard looked composed, professional, concerned. Every inch the worried father, protecting his son from an unstable mother. When he saw Lucas, his face shifted. Something softer, calculated. "Hey, buddy, you okay?" Lucas didn't answer. Pressed closer to Evelyn. Judge Morrison looked up. "We're here for an emergency custody hearing. Mr. Webb, your motion claims immediate danger to the minor child. That's a serious allegation. I hope you have serious evidence." Marcus Webb stood, smooth, confident. "Your Honor, we have affidavits from multiple witnesses documenting Mrs. Carter's increasingly erratic behavior following an unexpected financial windfall. We have evidence of her forcibly removing Mr. Carter from the family home without warning. We have testimony that she's been making impulsive financial decisions, consulting attorneys without her husband's knowledge, and turning their son against his father through parental alienation." Daniel stood. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Carter initiated divorce proceedings 3 weeks before Mrs. Carter won any lottery. We have evidence of his ongoing affair with a colleague. We have evidence of financial manipulation and premeditated destruction of his marriage for calculated gain. And we have recordings of Mr. Carter explicitly stating his intent to paint his wife as unstable in order to claim her lottery winnings." The room went silent. Marcus Webb's face paled slightly. Richard's jaw clenched. Judge Morrison leaned forward. "Recordings? Audio documentation from Mr. Carter's office spanning 6 months. All legally obtained through systems he authorized, all clearly demonstrating his state of mind and intentions." "Your Honor," Marcus interjected, "those recordings, if they exist, were obtained without my client's knowledge and may not be admissible. They were obtained by an employee operating recording systems your client himself approved for security purposes. Mr. Carter was aware his office was monitored. He simply forgot to monitor his own behavior." Judge Morrison held up a hand. "I'll hear the affidavits first, then we'll discuss recordings. Mr. Webb, call your first witness." Vanessa Morrison took the stand. Elegant, composed, every bit the professional woman with nothing to hide. Marcus walked her through questions designed to paint Evelyn as unhinged. "Can you describe Mrs. Carter's behavior when she entered her husband's office 3 days ago?" "She seemed agitated, confrontational. She made accusations without evidence and created a scene in front of their son. It was uncomfortable to witness."
Did she threaten anyone?
"Not explicitly, but her energy was aggressive, unstable." Daniel stood. "Ms. Morrison, how long have you been having an affair with Richard Carter?" Marcus shot to his feet. Objection! Relevance! It's directly relevant to the witness's credibility and motivation, Your Honor. Judge Morrison looked at Vanessa. You can answer. Vanessa's composure cracked, just slightly. I'm not having an affair. No? So when Mrs. Carter walked into her husband's office and found you in a compromising position, that was what exactly? We were having a business discussion. Daniel pulled out his phone. I have a recording of a conversation between you and Mr. Carter from 2 months ago. Would you like me to play it for the court? Or would you prefer to revise your answer? Vanessa's face flushed. We've been seeing each other, but that doesn't mean Mrs. Carter's behavior was appropriate. It means your testimony is biased. It means you have a vested interest in portraying Mrs. Carter negatively, so your relationship with her husband faces less scrutiny. It means you're not a credible character witness. That's all, Your Honor. Richard's mother came next, Patricia Carter, 72, imperious. The kind of woman who'd spent her life believing money and status made her opinion matter more than other people's reality. My son is a good man, a good father. That woman has turned him into a villain to justify her own behavior. Daniel didn't even stand. Mrs. Carter, when was the last time you visited your son's home? It's been several months. So your testimony about Mrs. Carter's parenting is based on what, exactly? My son tells me things. Your son who's trying to claim half of his wife's lottery winnings? That son? No further questions. James Patterson testified next. Nervous, clearly uncomfortable, lying under oath, but doing it anyway, because Richard had asked, or paid, or promised something. I've seen her acting strange, throwing things, yelling. Daniel pulled out his phone again. Mr. Patterson, do you know what perjury means? I'm not lying. You live 2 doors down from the Carters. Your house has a ring camera facing the street. I subpoenaed the footage this morning. Would you like to revise your statement before I show the judge that Mrs. Carter hasn't thrown anything, hasn't yelled at her son, and in fact, the only person caught on camera behaving aggressively is Mr. Carter, attempting to enter the home after his wife asked him to leave? James Patterson looked at Richard. Richard's face had gone stone cold. Maybe I got the days confused. Maybe you committed perjury. Your Honor, I move to dismiss all affidavits as demonstrably false. Judge Morrison looked at Marcus Webb. Counsel, did you verify any of these statements before submitting them? Marcus straightened his tie, buying time. We relied on our client's representation that these witnesses were credible. Then your client misrepresented. What else do you have? The financial concerns remain, Your Honor. Mrs. Carter came into a substantial sum and immediately began making decisions without consulting her husband. That suggests impulsive behavior. Daniel stood. She consulted attorneys and financial advisors. That's not impulsive. That's responsible. Meanwhile, Mr. Carter transferred $200,000 from joint accounts without his wife's knowledge or consent. Who's behaving impulsively? Richard leaned forward and whispered something to Marcus. Marcus nodded, stood again. Your Honor, my client is willing to propose a compromise. Joint custody with a 50-50 asset split. Everyone walks away whole. Evelyn's hands clenched. She'd known this was coming. The attempt to paint her as unreasonable if she refused what sounded fair to anyone not paying attention. Judge Morrison looked at Daniel. Counsel? My client rejects that proposal. The lottery winnings are separate property. Mr. Carter has no legal claim. And given his documented infidelity, his pattern of manipulation, and his willingness to use perjured testimony, we don't believe joint custody serves the child's best interest. Then what do you propose? Supervised visitation until Mr. Carter demonstrates he can prioritize his son's well-being over his own financial interests. Richard stood up, couldn't help himself. That's insane. He's my son. Judge Morrison's eyes hardened. Mr. Carter, sit down. You'll have your chance to speak. But Richard was already unraveling. She's poisoning him against me, using money to turn him into a weapon. This is exactly what I warned everyone about. Mr. Carter, I built that family. I provided everything. She contributed nothing, and now she thinks winning the lottery makes her better than me? Mr. Carter, one more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. But something in Richard had snapped. The mask he'd worn so carefully was cracking. You want to know the truth? Fine. She was a means to an end. A convenient wife who asked for nothing and gave whatever I needed. I was going to leave her anyway. The lottery just made it complicated. The courtroom went silent. Even Marcus Webb looked horrified. This was the thing you never said out loud. The quiet cruelty you kept buried under layers of plausible deniability. Judge Morrison leaned back. Mr. Carter, you just admitted you were planning to abandon your marriage before your wife won the lottery. That substantially undermines your claim that her financial decisions are the problem here. Richard seemed to realize what he'd done. Tried to backtrack. I didn't mean it like that. I think you meant it exactly like that. Mr. Webb, does your client have anything else to present that isn't perjured testimony or self-incriminating outbursts? Marcus looked defeated. No, Your Honor. Then I'm ready to hear from Mrs. Carter. Evelyn took the stand. Her hands shook, but her voice held steady. She told the truth. Simple. Clear. 15 years of making herself smaller. Of believing love meant sacrifice. Of waking up one day with $80 million and realizing money couldn't fix what had been broken from the start. I didn't leave him because of Vanessa. I mean, I did, but also I didn't. I left because when I saw them together, I finally saw clearly what I'd been ignoring for years. That my husband didn't value me, didn't respect me, didn't even like me. And I'd spent so long trying to earn something he was never going to give. Daniel asked the question they'd rehearsed. Do you want to keep Lucas from his father? No. I want Lucas to have a father who puts him first, who doesn't use him as a bargaining chip, who loves him more than he hates me. And if Mr. Carter can demonstrate that, then we figure out what's best for Lucas, together, like we should have been doing all along. Judge Morrison looked at Lucas. Son, I'd like to ask you some questions. Is that okay? Lucas nodded, walked to the stand, looked impossibly small in the chair designed for adults. Lucas, do you feel safe with your mother? Yes. Has she ever hurt you, scared you, made you feel in danger? No. How about with your father? Lucas hesitated. I feel confused with Dad. Like he's mad at Mom, and I'm supposed to be mad too. But I don't know why I should be mad at her. She's been the same. He's the one who's different. Different how? He stopped coming home. Stopped asking about school. Then suddenly, when Mom won money, he cares again. But it doesn't feel like he cares about me. It feels like he cares about something else. Richard made a sound, something between a protest and a sob. Lucas glanced at him, then looked away. Lucas, Judge Morrison said gently, if I let you choose where you want to live, what would you say? With Mom. But I want to see Dad sometimes, when he's not angry, when he's just Dad. Judge Morrison nodded, made notes. The courtroom held its breath. Finally, she looked up. I am granting Mrs. Carter primary physical custody. Mr. Carter will have supervised visitation every other weekend, pending completion of co-parenting classes and a psychological evaluation. The lottery winnings are Mrs. Carter's separate property. The $200,000 transferred without authorization will be returned to joint accounts pending final divorce settlement. And Mr. Carter, consider this a warning. If you continue to use your son as a weapon in this divorce, you will lose access altogether. Do you understand? Richard's face went white, then red. He looked at Marcus. Appeal! We appeal! Richard, we just lost because you couldn't keep quiet. I said appeal. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. This hearing is adjourned. Mrs. Carter, I'll have the written order delivered by end of day. Outside the courtroom, Evelyn held Lucas tight. Daniel stood guard, making sure Richard couldn't approach. But Richard did approach. Slowly, deliberately. Stopped just outside touching distance. You won't get away with this. That money is half mine. The judge just said it isn't. Judges can be wrong. Appeals exist. I have resources you can't imagine. Then use them. I'm not afraid anymore. Richard's eyes narrowed. You should be. Lucas stepped forward, his young voice cutting through the tension. Dad, stop! Richard looked at his son. Something in his expression shifted. Lucas, I'm doing this for you. No, you're not. You're doing it because you're mad Mom isn't scared of you anymore. That's not true. It is. And if you don't stop, I won't want to see you even when the judge says I can. The words landed like physical blows. Richard staggered back, looked at Evelyn. You did this. You turned him against me. No, Richard, you did this. Every time you chose yourself over him. Every time you used him as leverage. Every time you made him feel like love was conditional. Richard opened his mouth, closed it, turned, and walked away. Marcus Webb followed, already on his phone, probably calling whoever you called when your client destroyed his own case through arrogance and rage. Daniel squeezed Evelyn's shoulder. You need to be careful. Men like Richard don't accept loss well. I know. I'm serious, Mrs. Carter. He's going to try something else, something we haven't anticipated. And Daniel was right. They just didn't know how right, until 3 hours later, when Evelyn's phone rang with an unknown number. Mrs. Carter, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Fraud Division. We need to ask you some questions about your lottery ticket. Evelyn's blood went cold. What questions? Can you come down to the station? It's easier to explain in person. At the police station, Detective Chen was younger than Evelyn expected. Serious. Direct. She laid out documents across the interview table like playing cards. Mrs. Carter, we received a complaint alleging that your lottery ticket was purchased with funds embezzled from your husband's company accounts, that you had unauthorized access to corporate credit cards and used them for personal purchases, including the lottery ticket in question. Evelyn couldn't breathe. That's not true. Do you have the receipt for the ticket purchase? I don't know. I bought it with cash at a grocery store. Can you prove that? I can show you my bank statements, the cash withdrawal. We'll need those. Mrs. Carter, if this allegation is substantiated, you could face criminal charges. The Lottery Commission could invalidate your winnings. You need to take this seriously. Outside, Evelyn called Daniel. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone. They're trying to claim I used Richard's money to buy the ticket. That I stole from his company. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. That's smart. That's really smart. Because if they can prove the ticket was purchased with marital or corporate funds, they can claim the winnings as joint or even company property. But I didn't. I used my own money. Can you prove it? That was the question. Could she prove she'd bought a $2 lottery ticket with her own cash from a grocery run she barely remembered? Could she prove something so small it hadn't seemed worth documenting? I don't know. Then we have a problem, Mrs. Carter. Richard just found his new angle, and it's a good one. Lucas was quiet on the drive home, processing. Finally, he spoke. Mom, are you going to jail? No, baby. This is just Dad trying to scare me. Is it working? Evelyn wanted to lie, wanted to promise everything would be fine, but Lucas had earned truth. A little bit, yeah. What do we do? We prove I didn't do anything wrong. We find evidence. We fight back. What if we can't prove it? Evelyn pulled into their driveway, turned to look at her son. Then we prove something else, that even when people try to destroy us with lies, we don't become liars ourselves. We stay true. We stay good. And we trust the truth eventually wins. Does it always win? No, but it wins more often when we fight for it. Inside, Evelyn went through every bank statement, every receipt, every piece of financial documentation she could find, searching for proof of a $2 transaction from weeks ago that now meant everything. Her phone buzzed. Text from Jennifer. I have the store security footage from the day you bought the ticket. I know the manager. She pulled it for me. It shows you paying cash. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. How did you know? Because I know Richard, and I knew he'd try something like this. The footage is dated and time-stamped. It's yours if you need it. Why are you doing this? Because women like you deserve better than men like him, and because I'm tired of watching him win. At midnight, Evelyn lay awake. Lucas asleep down the hall. The house quiet, but not peaceful. Tomorrow she'd give the footage to Detective Chen. Tomorrow she'd prove Richard's latest lie. Tomorrow she'd take another step forward in a battle that seemed endless. But tonight, in the dark, Evelyn allowed herself one moment of doubt. One moment of wondering if fighting was worth the cost. If winning was possible when Richard had more money, more connections, more willingness to destroy than she had courage to withstand. Her phone lit up. Text from Daniel. I know you're scared. It's okay to be scared. Being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means being afraid and fighting anyway. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we show them exactly what they're up against. Evelyn turned off the phone, closed her eyes, and somewhere in the darkness, she found something she hadn't known was still there. Not hope exactly, not quite courage, but determination. Pure, simple, unbreakable. Richard wanted a war? Fine. She'd give him one. But this time, she wouldn't be fighting to be seen or valued or loved. She'd be fighting to protect her son and her future and her right to exist without someone else's permission. And that made all the difference. Morning broke with Detective Chen's call at 7:15. Evelyn hadn't slept, just waited for dawn, like it was permission to stop pretending. Mrs. Carter, can you come in at 9? We need to review your documentation. I have security footage from the store. It shows me buying the ticket with cash. A pause, long enough for Evelyn to hear Chen recalculating. Bring it. And Mrs. Carter, bring your attorney. Daniel met her at the station entrance. He looked like he'd been up all night too, running scenarios, building defenses, preparing for whatever Richard would throw next. The footage is good, but it's not enough. What do you mean? They're going to argue you withdrew the cash from joint accounts, that marital funds purchased the ticket regardless of payment method. We need to prove the cash came from separate sources. Evelyn's stomach dropped. She'd used the household account, the one they both contributed to, the one that was technically joint, even if she was the only one who ever used it for groceries. I can't prove that. Then we pivot. We show that Richard's claim is retaliatory, that he only filed this complaint after losing in court, that it's harassment, not legitimate concern. Detective Chen was waiting in the interview room. Professional, neutral, giving nothing away. Evelyn handed over the flash drive. Chen plugged it in. They watched together as grainy security footage showed Evelyn at the register, Lucas tugging her sleeve. The transaction. Cash changing hands. Timestamp clear and unmistakable. This proves you bought the ticket. Yes. It doesn't prove the money wasn't his. It was grocery money from our household account. The same account I've used for 12 years to feed our family. Chen leaned back. Mrs. Carter, I'm going to be straight with you. This complaint feels politically motivated. Your husband lost a custody hearing yesterday and filed this report 3 hours later. That's suspicious timing. So you're dropping it? I didn't say that. I'm saying we'll investigate thoroughly. If we find evidence of actual embezzlement, we prosecute. If we find evidence of false reporting, we prosecute that instead. Chen looked at Daniel. Your client should keep detailed records of everything. Every transaction, every communication, every threat. Because one way or another, someone's facing charges when this is over. Outside, Evelyn leaned against Daniel's car. Her hands shook. Not from fear anymore, from exhaustion. How long does this go on? Until he runs out of moves or runs out of money, whichever comes first. He has more money than I do. No, he has more access to credit. But Mrs. Carter, credit runs out, especially when you're spending it on lawyers and investigations and revenge instead of actual business. Richard's company isn't as solid as he pretends. Something in Daniel's voice made Evelyn look up. What do you know? I know that publicly traded companies file quarterly reports, and I know his company missed earnings targets 3 quarters in a row. I know there are rumors of mismanagement. I know the board isn't as loyal as he thinks they are. You think he's in trouble? I think he's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. At 10:30, Evelyn's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Mrs. Carter? This is Margaret Hill. I was Mr. Carter's executive assistant. Was? I was fired this morning, effective immediately. No explanation. Just security escorting me out with a box of my things. Evelyn closed her eyes. Because of the recordings. He knows it was me, or suspects. Either way, I'm out. Margaret, I'm so sorry. Don't be. I have documentation of everything, every illegal thing he asked me to do, every time he made me lie for him, every instance of sexual harassment I witnessed, but was told to ignore. He thinks firing me protects him. It just freed me to talk. You'd testify? I'd do more than testify. Mrs. Carter, Richard Carter destroyed my career, cost me opportunities, may be complicit in things I'm ashamed of. If I can take him down while clearing my conscience, that's not revenge. That's justice. After Margaret hung up, Daniel was already typing on his laptop. We need to move fast. If Richard's cleaning house, he's destroying evidence. We need to lock down everything before it disappears. How? Subpoenas. Lots of them. His company emails, his financial records, his phone logs, everything. We bury him in legal requests until he makes a mistake. At noon, Lucas called from school. His voice was wrong, too high, too stressed. Mom, there's a lady here. She says she's from social services. She wants to talk to me about living with you. Evelyn's blood went cold. Put Mrs. Patterson on the phone. The principal's voice was strained. Mrs. Carter, a caseworker showed up with a court order. Something about investigating Lucas's home environment. I didn't want to let her take him out of class without calling you first. Don't let her near him. I'm on my way. She made the drive in 10 minutes, burst through the school entrance to find a woman in a gray suit standing with Lucas outside the office. Lucas looked terrified.
Excuse me, who are you?
The woman turned. 50, professional, unmoved by Evelyn's panic. I'm Sandra Mills from Child Protective Services. I have a court order to interview your son regarding allegations of neglect. What allegations? Sandra handed her paperwork. Official, stamped. Filed by Richard Carter, claiming Evelyn had been leaving Lucas alone at night, feeding him inadequately, exposing him to drug use. Evelyn read it twice, each word more absurd than the last. None of this is true. That's what interviews determine. You're not interviewing my son without my attorney present. Mrs. Carter, obstructing the CPS investigation is a crime. So is filing false reports. My attorney will be here in 20 minutes. Lucas, come here. Lucas ran to her, wrapped his arms around her waist. Sandra Mills watched with the expression of someone who'd seen 1,000 desperate mothers claim innocence. Mrs. Carter, the more difficult you make this, the worse it looks. Then it looks bad. I don't care. You're not questioning my son without representation. Daniel arrived in 15 minutes. He reviewed the court order with growing fury. This was filed by an emergency judge at 8 this morning. The same judge who's Richard's golf partner. This isn't an investigation, it's retaliation. Sandra Mills didn't budge. I don't care about your marital politics. I care about the child's safety. Then let me show you evidence that every claim in this report is false. Lucas has perfect attendance. His teachers report no behavioral issues. Our home is safe and stable. And the drug allegation is particularly interesting, since Mrs. Carter has never used drugs and would happily submit to testing right now to prove it. Sandra's expression shifted slightly. You'd consent to immediate drug screening? Absolutely. And a home inspection? Today, right now, whatever you need to see that this is harassment, not concern. Sandra looked at Lucas, at Evelyn, at the documentation Daniel was already pulling from his briefcase. Fine. We'll start with the interview, but counselor, you can be present. They sat in the principal's conference room. Lucas in the middle, Evelyn and Daniel on one side, Sandra across from them with her clipboard and her careful questions designed to trap rather than discover truth. Lucas, do you feel safe at home? Yes. Does your mother leave you alone at night? No, she's always there. Has she ever used drugs or alcohol in front of you? No, Mom doesn't even drink wine. Does she feed you regularly? Lucas almost laughed. She makes me eat vegetables even when I don't want to. She's annoying about food. Sandra made notes, asked more questions, tried different angles. But Lucas's answers never changed because the truth didn't change. Evelyn was a good mother. Richard was lying. After an hour, Sandra closed her notebook. I'll need to visit the home. Today. At the house, Sandra walked through every room. Checked the refrigerator, Lucas's bedroom, the medicine cabinet, looking for evidence that didn't exist because the allegations were fiction. Mrs. Carter, your home is clean, well-stocked, safe. Your son is healthy and well-adjusted. I don't see evidence supporting these claims. So you'll close the investigation? I'll recommend closure, but understand, your husband can file again. And if he does, we have to investigate again. After Sandra left, Evelyn collapsed on the couch. Lucas sat beside her. Mom, why does Dad keep doing this? Because he's not trying to win anymore. He's trying to make me lose. What's the difference? Winning means he gets what he wants. Making me lose means I suffer even if he doesn't benefit. That's mean.
Yes, it is.
At 6, Daniel called with news that made Evelyn's hands shake for entirely different reasons. The board called an emergency meeting. They're investigating Richard's expense reports. Apparently, someone anonymously submitted documentation showing he's been billing personal expenses to the company for years, including jewelry for Vanessa, trips that had nothing to do with business. The affair just became a liability issue. Who submitted it? My guess? Margaret. But it doesn't matter. What matters is Richard's losing his grip on the company. Will they fire him? They might. Or they might force him to resign. Either way, his leverage is evaporating. At 8, Richard called. Evelyn let it go to voicemail. Listened later to his voice, desperate now instead of threatening. Evelyn, we need to talk. This has gone too far. People are trying to destroy me, and you're letting it happen. We can still fix this. Call me. Please. She deleted it. At 9, Vanessa Morrison called. That was unexpected. Mrs. Carter, I need to tell you something. I don't think we have anything to discuss. Please, just listen. Richard lied to me. About everything. He told me you were separated, that you'd agreed to divorce, that you didn't love him anymore and were just waiting for the right time. I'm not excusing what I did, but I thought I was with someone available. You thought wrong. I know that now. Mrs. Carter, he's using me too. I just got served with papers. He's suing me for sexual harassment, claiming I pursued him, that it was unwanted, that he's a victim. Evelyn sat down hard. He's what? He's destroying me to save himself, telling the board I seduced him, that he tried to stop it, but I threatened his career. It's all lies, and I have proof, but, Mrs. Carter, he's a monster. I didn't see it before, but I see it now. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know what you're fighting. He'll say anything, do anything, destroy anyone. He doesn't care about truth or consequences. He only cares about winning. After Vanessa hung up, Evelyn sat in silence, processing. Richard wasn't just fighting her. He was burning everything down rather than admit defeat. At 10, Marcus Webb called, Richard's attorney, the man who'd sat beside Richard in court and watched him self-destruct. Mrs. Carter, I'm withdrawing from the case. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Why? Because my client lied to me, repeatedly, about the affair, about the finances, about his intentions. I don't represent liars, not when it makes me complicit in fraud. What fraud? I can't say specifically, attorney-client privilege. But Mrs. Carter, get a forensic accountant. Look at his company finances, really look. The divorce isn't your biggest problem. After Marcus hung up, Evelyn called Daniel. Richard's attorney just quit, said something about fraud, about company finances. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. I'll make calls. But Mrs. Carter, if what I think is true, Richard's not just losing the divorce. He's losing everything. At 11, Evelyn checked on Lucas, found him awake, staring at his ceiling. Can't sleep? Is Dad going to jail? The question hung between them. Honest, terrifying, real. I don't know, baby. Maybe. Would that make me a bad person if I didn't feel sad about it? Evelyn sat on the edge of his bed. No, it would make you human. You can love someone and still be glad when they stop hurting people. Do you still love him? I love who I thought he was. I grieve that person. But the man doing these things now? No, I don't love that man. I don't even recognize him. Me either. At midnight, Evelyn received an email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line was simple. You need to see this. She opened it, found a video file, pressed play. Richard's office. The camera angle suggested it was from his computer. The date stamp was from 2 months ago. Richard and another man Evelyn didn't recognize, discussing moving money offshore, hiding assets, preparing for when the board figures it out. The other man's voice was clear. If they discover the shortfall, we're both finished. Richard laughed. They won't. And if they do, I have a wife who'll make a convenient scapegoat. She has access to the accounts, her signatures on documents. By the time anyone untangles it, I'll be in the Caymans with money they can't touch. The video ended. Evelyn sat frozen. This wasn't just divorce. This wasn't just custody. Richard had been planning to frame her for financial crimes she didn't commit, had been setting her up for months while smiling over dinner and sleeping beside her at night. She forwarded the video to Daniel, to Detective Chen, to the FBI tip line, because she wasn't sure where else to send evidence of what looked like corporate fraud. At 1 a.m, Daniel called. Where did you get this? Someone emailed it. I don't know who. Mrs. Carter, this changes everything. If this is authentic, Richard's not fighting a divorce anymore. He's fighting federal charges. Is it enough? It's a start, but we need more. We need his financial records, his offshore accounts, his co-conspirators' testimony. We need to build a case that's airtight. How long will that take? Weeks, maybe months. But Mrs. Carter, you're not the target anymore. He is. At 2, Evelyn finally lay down, exhausted but wired. Tomorrow would bring more battles, more accusations, more desperate attempts by Richard to drag her down with him. But tonight, for the first time since this began, Evelyn felt something shift. She wasn't fighting to survive anymore. She was fighting to expose truth so complete that Richard couldn't hide behind lies anymore. At 3, her phone lit up. Text from Jennifer. The video was from me. I've been recording everything for 6 months. There's more if you need it. Enough to bury him forever. Evelyn typed back with shaking hands. Why? Because some of us have been waiting years for someone strong enough to stand up to him. You're not alone in this fight. You never were. At 4, Evelyn heard Lucas's door open, his small footsteps in the hallway. He appeared in her doorway. Mom, I had a nightmare. Come here, baby. Lucas climbed into bed beside her, pressed close the way he had when he was small, and believed his mother could protect him from anything. Are we going to be okay? Evelyn held her son and told him the only truth she knew for certain. Yes, because we're not giving up. And people who don't give up eventually win. Maybe not the way they expected, maybe not as fast as they hoped, but they win because they're still standing when everyone else falls down. Promise? I promise, real promise. Lucas fell asleep against her shoulder. Evelyn stayed awake, watching dawn creep through the windows, feeling the weight of battle ahead, but also the strength of truth behind her. Richard had spent months building a trap, but he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated the women he'd dismissed as powerless, the secretaries he'd never noticed, the wife he'd assumed would never fight back, the colleagues he'd betrayed without thinking they'd remember. And now they were all standing together, comparing notes, sharing evidence, building a case so overwhelming that even Richard's money and connections couldn't save him. At 7, Evelyn got up, made coffee, started breakfast, moved through the morning routine like armor. Lucas woke, confused but calm. They ate together, spoke about normal things, school, homework, weekend plans, because this was what winning looked like. Not dramatic confrontations, not courtroom victories, but ordinary mornings where your child felt safe, and you felt free, and the person who tried to destroy you was no longer the center of your universe. At 8, Daniel called. "The FBI wants to meet. They have questions about the video, about Richard's finances. Mrs. Carter, you're going to need to testify." "I don't know anything about his business." "You know enough. You have access we don't. Documents, passwords, history. You're the key to unlocking everything." "What if I can't remember?" "Then we find what you can remember." "But Mrs. Carter, this is it. This is how we end him. Not through divorce court, through criminal court." Evelyn thought about Richard's face in court. His desperation, his rage, his absolute certainty that he'd win because he always won. "When do they want to meet?" "Today, this afternoon. Are you ready?" Evelyn looked at Lucas eating cereal at the kitchen table. Safe. Whole. Hers. "Yes, I'm ready." Because ready wasn't about being fearless. It was about being tired of being afraid. It was about deciding that protecting your child mattered more than protecting yourself. It was about understanding that sometimes the only way out was through. And Evelyn was done looking for easier paths. The FBI field office was nothing like Evelyn expected. No dramatic interrogation rooms, just conference spaces with bad coffee and fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. Agent Michael Torres was 40-something, sharp eyes, the kind of calm that came from seeing every version of human deception. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for coming. We've reviewed the video. We have questions." Daniel sat beside her, squeezed her hand once under the table. Permission to be nervous. Reminder to be honest. "I'll tell you whatever I can." Torres pulled out files, bank statements, company records, emails with Evelyn's name on them, her signature, her account numbers. "Did you authorize these transfers?" Evelyn looked at documents she'd never seen before. Large sums moving from company accounts to offshore entities. Her electronic signature at the bottom of each one. "No, I've never seen these." "But that's your signature." "It's my electronic signature. Richard had access to it. He used it for household things, bills, school paperwork. I trusted him." Torres made notes. "So your husband could sign your name to anything and you wouldn't know?" "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying." "Mrs. Carter, these documents move over $40 million. Your husband is claiming you did this without his knowledge, that you've been embezzling from his company for years." The room tilted. Evelyn gripped the table. "That's a lie. I don't even understand these accounts. I don't know what half these entities are." "Then help us understand. Walk us through your access to company finances." So she did. Every detail she could remember. Richard asking her to sign papers without reading them, saying it was routine, saying she didn't need to worry about business details, saying trust was what made marriages work. He was building my participation into the crime. That's what it looks like. "Mrs. Carter, did you ever question these signatures?" "No, I trusted my husband." That's what people do in marriages, right? They trust each other. Torres leaned back. "They shouldn't when one person is committing fraud." After 2 hours, Torres closed his files. "Mrs. Carter, you're not under investigation, but your husband is, and he's going to claim you're a co-conspirator, that you knew everything, that you helped plan it." "How do I prove I didn't?" "You already are. Your consistency, your documentation, the fact that you came forward with evidence that implicates you if you're lying. Guilty people don't do that." At 3, they broke for lunch. Evelyn couldn't eat, just picked at a sandwich while Daniel made phone calls and Torres consulted with other agents. Through the conference room window, she saw them nodding, pointing at documents, building something she couldn't quite see. At 4, Torres returned. "We're bringing him in for questioning. Today. We wanted you to know." "Will he be arrested?" Depends on what he says. If he cooperates, maybe not immediately. If he lies, definitely. He'll lie. I believe you. At 5:30, Evelyn's phone rang. Richard. She looked at Torres. He nodded. Answer it. Put it on speaker. Hello? Evelyn? Richard's voice was different, scared, trying to hide it, failing. We need to talk, now, in person. I don't think that's a good idea. The FBI contacted me. They're asking questions about company finances, about your signatures. Evelyn, you need to tell them this was a misunderstanding. Torres was recording, taking notes, watching Evelyn's face. What was a misunderstanding, Richard? The accounts, the transfers. You knew about them. We discussed them, remember? No, we didn't. Evelyn, please. If you don't back me up on this, we're both going to prison. I'm not going to prison, Richard. I didn't do anything. You signed the documents. You forged my signature. Silence. Long, heavy. That's not true. Yes, it is, and you know it. And now they know it. Richard's voice changed, desperate. If you do this, if you let them arrest me, Lucas loses his father. Think about that. Think about what that does to him. I am thinking about him. I'm thinking he deserves better than a father who's a criminal. You're destroying our family. No, Richard. You already did that. She hung up, looked at Torres. Is that enough? It's a start. At 6:15, Torres got a call. Spoke in low tones. Hung up. Looked at Evelyn. Your husband just left the country. Private jet to the Caymans. He's running. Evelyn's blood went cold. Can you stop him? We're trying, but Mrs. Carter, if he makes it offshore with the money, recovery becomes complicated. Daniel was already on his phone, making calls, pulling strings Evelyn didn't know existed. At 6:45, he hung up. The plane was turned around. Federal marshals met it at the airport. He's in custody. Evelyn couldn't breathe. He actually ran. Guilty people do that. At 7, Evelyn went home. Lucas was with Mrs. Henderson next door. Safe. Fed. Unaware that his father had just been arrested trying to flee the country. She'd have to tell him. Soon. But not yet. Not until she could do it without breaking. At 8, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Mrs. Carter? This is Gerald Price. I was Richard's partner, the man in the video. Evelyn's hands shook. What do you want? To tell you I'm cooperating with the FBI. I'm giving them everything. Account numbers, transaction records, communications, all of it. Why? Because Richard told them I acted alone, that he knew nothing, that I manipulated him. So I'm done protecting him. Mrs. Carter, your husband is a sociopath. He'll destroy anyone to save himself, including you if you let him. I won't. Good, because the testimony I'm giving, it clears you completely, shows you had no knowledge, no involvement. I'm making sure of it. Why would you do that for me? I'm not. I'm doing it to him. But you benefit. Sometimes revenge and justice look the same. At 9, Daniel called. Richard's bail hearing is tomorrow. The prosecutor is asking for no bail, flight risk, danger of evidence tampering. They're pushing for him to stay in custody until trial. Will that work? Given that he literally tried to flee the country today? Yes, that will work. At 10, Evelyn finally told Lucas. They sat on the couch, his favorite blanket around his shoulders. She chose words carefully, honestly, without cruelty, but without lies. Your dad made some bad choices. About money, about work. He's in trouble with the police. Is he in jail? Yes. Lucas was quiet, processing. Because of you? No, because of him. Because he broke laws. I just stopped covering for him. Are you sad? Evelyn thought about the question. Really thought. I'm sad about what could have been, about the father you deserved. But I'm not sad he's facing consequences. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think I feel the same way. They sat together, not talking, just being. And somehow, that was enough. At 11, Evelyn received an email from the Lottery Commission. They'd reviewed the fraud allegations, found them baseless. Her winnings were secure. Protected. Hers. At midnight, she allowed herself to cry. Not for Richard, not for the marriage, but for the years she'd lost believing love meant making yourself small. For the woman she could have been if she'd found her voice sooner. The next morning, Richard's bail hearing was brief. The judge looked at the flight risk, the offshore accounts, the documented fraud. Bail denied. Defendant will remain in custody pending trial. Richard's eyes found Evelyn across the courtroom, filled with hate, pure, undiluted. He mouthed something. She couldn't tell what. Didn't care enough to try. Outside, reporters swarmed. Cameras, questions, chaos. Daniel shielded her, guided her to the car. Don't say anything. Not yet. When? When we've won. Not before. Over the next 3 weeks, Richard's world collapsed in slow motion. The company fired him. The board filed lawsuits. Shareholders demanded investigations. His mother called Evelyn once. Brief. Cold. You've destroyed him. No, he destroyed himself. I just stopped lying about it. Patricia hung up. The divorce trial was almost anticlimactic after everything else. Richard appeared via video from jail. Looked smaller. Defeated. His new attorney argued for leniency, for consideration of his circumstances. Judge Morrison wasn't moved. Mr. Carter, you committed fraud. You betrayed your wife's trust. You attempted to frame her for your crimes. You used your son as a weapon. The court finds no reason for leniency. The divorce was granted. Evelyn got primary custody, full control of her lottery winnings, half of legitimate marital assets once Richard's debts were paid. Which wasn't much. Most of his wealth was either stolen or spent. Mr. Carter, you built a house of cards. It fell. That's not your wife's fault. That's yours. After the hearing, Evelyn stood outside the courthouse, breathed air that tasted like freedom. Daniel stood beside her. It's done. Yes. How do you feel? Evelyn thought about the question. Tired, sad, but also lighter, like I can finally breathe. That's healing starting. It gets easier. 2 months later, Richard's criminal trial ended in conviction. 47 counts of fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion. The judge sentenced him to 15 years, federal prison, no parole. Evelyn didn't attend. Didn't need to. The man being sentenced wasn't her husband anymore, just a stranger who'd worn his face. Lucas asked once if they could visit. Evelyn said yes. They went together, sat across from Richard in a visitation room that smelled like cleaning products and desperation. Richard looked broken. Older. I'm sorry. For everything. Lucas stared at his father. Are you sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught? Richard didn't answer. Couldn't. The truth was in his silence. They left after 20 minutes. Didn't go back. 6 months after that day in Richard's office, Evelyn stood in the kitchen of her house. The same house, but different. Walls painted new colors. Photos changed. Space rearranged, making it hers instead of theirs. Lucas was doing homework at the table. 13 now. Taller. Calmer. Healing in ways that showed in how he laughed easier. Argued about normal things. Acted like a kid instead of a worried caretaker.
Mom, I got invited to Jordan's birthday party.
That's great. When?
Saturday. Can I go?
Of course. Cool. Simple. Normal. Beautiful. Evelyn's phone rang. Jennifer. They'd become friends. Real friends. Coffee tomorrow? I'd like that. Bring Lucas. My nephew's in town. Same age. Maybe they'd hit it off. Maybe. After Jennifer hung up, Evelyn looked around her kitchen. Sunlight through windows. Coffee brewing. Her son, safe and whole. Her life, her own.
She thought about the woman who'd walked into that office building with lottery papers and hope.
How naive she'd been. How desperate for validation from someone who'd never see her. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone harder, wiser, scarred, but standing. She'd lost 15 years to a man who'd never valued them. Lost illusions. Lost certainty. Lost the comfortable lie that love was enough when respect didn't exist. But she'd gained something more valuable. She'd gained herself.
The lottery hadn't saved her. The money had helped. The lawyers had helped. The woman who'd stood beside her had helped. But at the end, Evelyn had saved herself by deciding she mattered, that her voice deserved to be heard, that her son deserved better than watching her disappear. People asked sometimes if she'd do it differently, if she'd leave sooner, fight harder, see the signs earlier. She didn't know. Maybe. Probably. But she also knew that you couldn't rewrite the past, only learn from it. Only use it to build a future that honored the price you'd paid. Lucas looked up from his homework. Mom, are you okay? Evelyn smiled. Real. True. Yeah, baby. I really am. Good. He went back to his math. She went back to chopping vegetables. Ordinary moments. Simple moments. The kind of moments she'd once dismissed as meaningless. But they weren't meaningless. They were everything. These quiet hours where no one was manipulating her, where she wasn't walking on eggshells, where she could exist without permission. This was victory. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady, sure, permanent. At dinner, Lucas asked about college plans, about maybe playing soccer, about whether they could get a dog. Evelyn said yes to all of it. Why not? Why not fill their life with good things instead of fear? Why not say yes to joy when she'd spent so long saying yes to suffering? That night, after Lucas was asleep, Evelyn sat on her back porch. Stars overhead. Silence that felt like peace instead of threat. She thought about Richard in prison, about how he'd wake up tomorrow behind bars, how he'd wake up the day after that, how he'd wake up for the next 15 years, knowing he'd destroyed everything because he couldn't stand to share. She didn't feel pleasure in his suffering, didn't feel vindication, just felt distance. Like he was a character in a story she'd once lived, but had now finished reading. Her phone buzzed. Text from Daniel. Forbes wants to interview you about women who've overcome financial abuse. Interested? She typed back. Maybe. Let me think. Because that was new too. Taking time to decide instead of reacting. Considering what she wanted instead of what others needed from her. At midnight, Evelyn went to bed. Her bed. No one else's. Sheets she'd chosen. Pillows that smelled like her detergent instead of his cologne. Small things. Powerful things.
She thought about Jennifer's text, about coffee tomorrow, about Lucas playing with another kid his age, about building a life from authentic moments instead of performed ones. This was healing, slow, sometimes painful, but real. And as Evelyn drifted toward sleep, she felt something she hadn't felt in 15 years. Certainty. Not about the future, not about what would come next, but certainty about herself, about her value, about her right to exist without someone else's approval. Richard had tried to make her invisible, had spent 15 years teaching her that her worth was conditional on his satisfaction. But he'd failed, because Evelyn Carter had learned the most important lesson of all, that the moment you stop waiting for someone else to see you and start seeing yourself, you become unstoppable. That money doesn't make you powerful. Truth makes you powerful. That winning isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about refusing to be destroyed. And that sometimes the greatest victory is simply standing up, walking away, and building a life where the person who hurt you no longer has any space at all. Evelyn had won. Not because Richard was in prison, not because she had money, not because the judge had sided with her. She'd won because she'd chosen herself, finally, completely, without apology. And that was the kind of victory that could never be taken away.